Can we give it up one more time for Janessa? Yeah. I don't think you guys want to hear me sing, so I think it's better that she does.
I do.
All right, well, that makes two of y'all. But my name is Cole. I'm here with Shift Yth. I'm just glad I get to preach to you guys tonight. Today, I'm going to be preaching out of 1 Kings chapter 17 and 18. If you're unfamiliar with those, Brady, can you do the verses? Sorry. But if you're unfamiliar with those, that's the story of Elijah, and when Elijah is a prophet over Israel. And there are two kingdoms at the time, right? There is the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. So this is happening while Ahab and Jezebel are both reigning over the Israelites, the northern kingdom. And so these are God's chosen people, but Elijah is the prophet at the time. And we're going to start in verse 1 of 1 Kings 17. I'm reading out of the ESV if you want to follow along. And it starts with, "Now Elijah said to Ahab, As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word." Right? So basically what Elijah is telling these people is there is going to be a drought, right? You guys, the Israelites have been wicked. You guys have been doing the wrong things, following false idols. So there will be a drought in the land. You guys will not have water for a few years except by the word of God. Like, unless God specifically says there's going to be rain here, God speaks to Elijah. Like, if that doesn't happen, there is no rain in this land for 3 years. And in verse 7, we see, and after a while the brook dried up because there was no rain in the land. So it's pretty simple. There's just no water, right? Because these people were following false gods. And this annoyed Ahab, because Elijah's telling Ahab this, and Elijah goes up to the king, and he's like, no water. Ahab is pretty upset about this. He thought Elijah was the reason, or Elijah just had some sort of hatred or animosity towards Ahab, that he was like, I'm not giving you rain. No, that's not what it was. It was just God didn't want Ahab to have any water in the land because of their wickedness. And this made Ahab very angry, and he took it out on Elijah. He wanted to kill Elijah, but we skip to the next chapter as Elijah is in hiding. And 18 verses 1, chapter 18, it says, "After many days the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go, show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth." So it says, came to Elijah in the 3rd year. So that means there are 3 years in the northern kingdom of Israel where there's no rain. There's this huge drought in Israel. So all these people are famished. They're just trying to find water. And Elijah comes up, has to go to Ahab, verse 17, and it says, when Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" Because Ahab just hates Elijah at this point. He thinks he's the reason there's no rain, there's no water. And he says, you troubler of Israel. And Elijah answered him, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, in your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals." Right? And if you're unfamiliar with what the Baals were, the Baal was the false idol that all these people were worshiping. And Baal was supposedly the false god of vegetation, right? All these crops would grow and there would be greater harvest just because these people worshipped Baal, right? That was the whole goal of it. And Baal was, obviously, he's false, so he wasn't real, but these people, when they worshipped Baal, they would do social partying, there would be vibrant practices, there were ecstatic community feasting, there were feelings of freedom, child sacrifice, and so many other terrible things that all these people in the northern kingdom of Israel were doing. And it was all supported and all trademarked by the king Ahab and the queen Jezebel, who those two were the king and queen at the time. And so basically you have this entire kingdom, this entire nation of Israel that once was governed by Moses and once was started by Abraham and was governed by great judges like Gideon and even Samson, who was another good judge. But all these people who used to worship God, instead now they're following this false idol Baal. And all these people are doing are partying. They're taking part in vibrant practices, this feasting, these feelings of just freedom and the child sacrifice and all these things that these people were doing. right? And so Elijah, after he answers, I've not troubled Israel, but you have, he says in verse 19, now therefore send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. And Jezebel, who was the queen at the time, she promoted murder of the prophets of God. She promoted moral and political corruption, and she died a painful death because of all of her wicked things that she did, right? But basically that sets the scene for this battle in 863 BC approximately, which was probably the battle of the century, right? I don't know other things that were taking place in the 800s BC. There wasn't that much. King David, Solomon, all those guys ruled in like the 900s. So there wasn't that much happening in the 800s. We're going to call this the battle of the century, right? And so there was no bigger matchup in the 9th century BC. And then we go into verse 20, it says, so Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And so now you have these two sides, right? And this is God's side, and it's just Elijah. There's nobody else there. Like, it's just Elijah. And then you have Baal's side and King Ahab's side, and it's 850 prophets of Ahab and people who sit at Jezebel's table. So prophets of Ahab, Baal, and Jezebel, right? And so Elijah came near to all the people because there were crowds forming, and he said, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? And there's this popular analogy, I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of it, of the man stuck between heaven and hell, right? And there's a fence in the middle dividing the two. And heaven's on this side, and he sees all the great things of the Lord. He sees heaven, all this wonderful stuff, the streets of gold. And then he sees hell, and he sees all this like vibrant practices, the community feasting, the ritual prostitution, the child sacrifice, like all these things that bring them freedom. He sees freedom, all these things that he wants to do. Right? And so there's a fence in between, and he decides, I don't have to pick between either of you. I can have both of you if I just sit on the fence. And then immediately everything turns into darkness, right? And then the devil famously says to the man, the fence is mine too. Because the man's like, what happened? I was sitting on the fence. I didn't pick a side. And the devil says to the man, the fence was mine too. And so that is like what we have here. And Elijah, talking to the people, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? Because in biblical Israel, a main storyline was that the Israelites at times, they would follow God, and then God would bless them, and then they'd be like, you know what, we want to have freedom, and then God would let them be overtaken. And now they're crying out, God, save us, and then God would save them, and then they're over here and worshiping false idols again, and then God would let them fall. And all these people, they would go between these two different opinions, the opinions of Baal and the opinions of God. People wanted water, and they thought Baal controlled the weather. People turned to Baal when they didn't know what to do. Judges 8:33 tells us, as soon as Gideon died, who was one of the judges of Israel, the people of Israel turned again and followed after the Baals and made Baal their god, right? And then they treated Baal like a god, where they would worship him with all the terrible things that I've said earlier. But Elijah then says to the people, if the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. And the people didn't answer a word. They were like this man sitting on a fence. They were saying, we're not going to pick a side. We like what both parties have to offer. We're not picking a side. And then Elijah said to the people when no one moved, I, even I only, am left a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450 men, and the 400 prophets of Jezebel. Let 2 bulls be given to us, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, and cut it into pieces, and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. And then I will prepare the other bull, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire to it. And you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord, my God. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people answered, it is well spoken. So there's this image right here. There is like a wooden stump or something where you have this bull cut into pieces, just raw bull meat, and Elijah is getting ready to light the thing on fire. But instead of Elijah doing it, on these 2 bulls cut into pieces, he says, you know what? Your God versus my God. If your God can put the thing on fire, can light the bull on fire, then we will worship you. But if my God, the Lord Yahweh, can light this bull on fire, we will worship him instead. That is going to be the sign, because both of them can't coexist, and we're just going to see which one doesn't, right? Because only one of them is real, so we're going to see which one is real. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourselves one bull and prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire to it. So, we have Elijah, we have 850 prophets of Jezebel and Baal. You would think that 850 prophets, they're going first, they're going to do all they can, they're going to be worshiping Baal, they're going to be just, however they worship Baal, they're going to be doing it just to try and get this fire from the heavens to come down on this bull sacrifice that's on an altar. And so, Elijah's on the other side doing the exact same thing, but he's waiting for them. And this all takes place in the morning. And we see these prophets of Baal in verse 26, and it says, they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. And if you read verse 28, it says, these people were crying aloud and cutting themselves after their customs with swords and lances until blood is gushing out upon them. And I think it's the next slide. We actually have an image of those people. Yeah, that's like, we have cameras we sent back in time to get what these people look like with the blood gushing out. These angry dudes trying to get some blood, trying to get some fire to rain down from the heavens. But if we go back to the last slide, we see that verse 27, it was noon, because they were going from all the way, starting in the morning, going to noon. And at noon, Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or is he relieving himself, or is he on a journey, or perhaps your God is asleep and must be wakened. So they keep crying aloud. They're cutting themselves. They're doing everything more and more. Maybe their God's just asleep. But as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation. But there was no voice. No one answered, and no one paid attention. And this is interesting, because you could take an approach to this and say we should respect everybody, and respect is a very important thing. But are we ever this bold, like Elijah? Are we ever so respectful of other religions that we just say, why would he be so bold? And what if he's wrong? Why would he be so bold to say, oh, your God must be amusing himself? Like, who cares if we're disrespecting a false God? Like, who cares if we're disrespecting the devil? Like, that is something that a lot of people struggle with. They don't want to stand against evil. They don't want to stand against wrong because they're scared of what people say. But instead, Elijah, in this time, he was like, cry aloud, for he is a God. He must be asleep. He must be relieving himself. Maybe he's on a journey. What is your God doing right now? But obviously we see that Baal never comes to an answer because, well, Baal wasn't real. And then we go into the next verse. It says, then Elijah said to all the people, come near to me. And all the people came near to him. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. So he has this bull on an altar of the Lord, and he takes 12 stones. It says Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, right? The 12 tribes of Israel, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be your name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain a lot of seed. I don't even know what that word is. I'm not going to pronounce it. But he puts the wood in order and cuts the bull in pieces and laid it on the wood. And then he actually says, fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. And then he said, do it a second time. And they did it a second time. And he said, do it a third time. And they did it a third time. So he's trying to light this thing on fire. He's trying to light this wood with bull on it on fire, right? And I don't know, let's say we wanted to start a campfire out there like we have for youth events. What we're going to do is we're going to get wood, and then we're going to get like a match. We're going to light it on fire. But what we're not going to do is just pour water all over this stuff and then try and light the water on fire, because that's not going to happen. Like, you can't physically light like water on fire, right? I could be wrong. That's not. Am I wrong? Okay, I'm not wrong. But you can't light water on fire. And so he's dumping all this water all over the altar. And I'm sure people are in the crowd saying, what is he doing? you can't do this, like what I'm saying, you can't do this. You can't put water on fire. And they did it a third time. And the water's running around the altar, and there's just this trench surrounding the altar with water. And Elijah just doesn't care. He's like, there's water everywhere. I don't care. We got water that we're going to light on fire. Like, God, my God can do everything. He's not limited to what the powers of normal science and normal man are. And so we go into the next verse. And at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so that these people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. So Elijah's ready for these people to see what he's going to do, and he is calling out to God. This is him praying to God, and he just is ready for this altar to be filled with fire, because that was what his claim was in the beginning. Whichever altar starts with fire is God. Like, if it's this side, then Yahweh, the God of Israel, is God. If it's this side, then Baal is the God, and we should all be worshiping him instead. But then we go into verse 38, and I love the first word here. That's the first word that really strikes me, that I really like. It doesn't say in 8 hours later, the fire of the Lord. It doesn't say 3 days later, the fire of the Lord. It says immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. So these crowds of people that are watching, they're not stuck on this fence anymore. They're over here because they've seen this great work of God. God raining fire down from the heavens to light this bull on fire, to burn it up, and all the water that's around it. Everything is just burned. And then later, the next verse, it says in verse 40, and Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook and slaughtered them there. Because, here's the deal. These prophets of Baal, they had known that Jesus is God. Or God is, Yahweh is God, right? Because these prophets, they've been following Baal for years, and nothing happened. There was, like I said, there was a drought for 3 years, so nothing has been happening. But yet, they just love the freedom. They just love the partying. They just love the feasting. They love all these things. They just want to be together with Jezebel and Ahab, their king and queen. They just want to follow what their king and queen, their rulers, are saying. And so they're following Jezebel and Ahab. They're following Baal, right? And no matter what happens, because the crowds came over here, but the prophets stayed over here, and they were like, we're still going to follow Baal, even though he's not real. We're still following Baal because we love the freedom, we love the sacrifice, we love the partying. And also they were pushing their narrative on these crowds. They were trying to still light their thing on fire. They were still trying to show that Baal was real. No matter whether anything happened or not, these prophets were trying to push the agendas of Ahab and Jezebel and Baal. And Elijah says, seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they seized them. Because these prophets, whether anything happened the next day, they were still going to turn around and they were still going to be trying to push their narrative on the crowds. They were going to try and push their narrative on Elijah. They were going to try and push their narrative on Elisha and all these people, because that's just what they did. They were spirits of the devil. And Elijah goes back and he says, seize them, don't let them escape. Like they're prisoners in battle, like he captured them, right? He didn't let them escape. Because if he had just let them escape, what would they have done the next day? They would have seeped into these people and they would have been able to turn them away. And so, verse 41, Elijah goes to Ahab after this drought. Because Ahab is still furious with Elijah. I don't know if he was in this crowd, but whether or not, he's still furious with Elijah because there's no water. And he blames Elijah for this. And so Elijah comes to Ahab. He says, go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of the rushing of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink. Elijah just told him, there's going to be rain. We haven't had rain in 3 years. There's going to be rain. And Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel, and he bowed himself down on the earth and put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, "Go up now, look toward the sea." And he went up and looked and said, "There is nothing." And Elijah said, "Go again." And then this happened 7 more times. It doesn't tell us this servant's name, but I really appreciate what this servant did, because it wasn't one time when Elijah said, "Go up and look at the sea if there's going to be rain." And then the servant comes back, "There's nothing, Elijah." And then he goes again. "There's nothing, Elijah." He goes again. And this happened 7 times. Like, the servant was still faithful. It wasn't, "Go look at the sea," like the 5th, 6th time, and the servant's like, "There's not going to be water. I don't know what you're talking about." Like, the servant doesn't do that. He goes out and looks again and again and again. And after 7 times, the servant goes out and they find water at the end. Right? And I think the next slide might, or go to the next slide, sorry. That's a visual of what we have. The hurricanes and the winds and the rain, all this stuff came down on Israel, and it was rain, and these people got the water that they had been searching for 3 years. But if we go back to the last slide, to verses 44. At the 7th time, he said, "Behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea." So basically, this servant sees what looks like God's hand literally rising from the sea. And he said, "Go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down, lest the rain stop you." And in a little while, the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. And then the chapter ends there. But overall, we have these 2 sides of God and ill. And we can put this in our own lives where it may seem hard. There's water on Elijah's sacrifice. That's a big obstacle. There's one of Elijah and 850 prophets over him. It's just one dude versus 850. That's another obstacle. But it's important for us to stay strong in our faith and know that the God we serve, is bigger than all these problems that we may be thinking. Because we just see one person versus 850. We just see, these dudes can jump this guy, and like everything's over. But that's not how we should see it. We see, there's water over here. There's no way that could be lit on fire. We might go help Elijah if we're in the crowd and say, "Hey, you shouldn't be pouring water on that." But all these obstacles that we might think are happening, they're not obstacles in the face of God, because God can do anything, and he will do anything for us. He is bigger than any enemy we might face, whether it's Baal, whether it's the devil, whether it's anything in our lives. God is bigger than anything we face. And then 1 Kings 19, which is the chapter after this, then gets into how Jezebel and Ahab talked about it, and they still wanted to kill Elijah because he defeated him. And that's why it was so important for Elijah to seize all the prophets of Baal, because no matter what, they were still going to try and kill Elijah just because he had preached the message of God, right? And so overall, we have these 2 sides, and it's important to pick a side, right? Are we going to pick the side over here that's freedom and feasting and all of these things that might seem great, all these things in the world that might just seem great, listening to whatever music we want, saying whatever things we want to say, doing whatever things we want to do with our actions? Or do we want to go over here and surrender to God and give our life to him and just spend the rest of our life worshiping God instead of worshiping the world? And if everybody wants to bow their heads and close their eyes, I'm going to end in a time of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you that we can all be gathered here and worship today. Thank you that we can all be gathered here and listen to your word today. Thank you for all the opportunities you've given us in our lives. Everybody has their own things going on right now as we go back to school. And I hope that everybody can find you in what they're going through right now, that they can go to you in a time of need and not go to the things of the world, not go to false idols that exist in our world, but instead spend their life going to you. And I thank you for everything you've given us, Lord. And in Jesus' name I pray, amen. You guys are dismissed. You guys can go live your life now. Have fun doing what you do.
growing.